Forza Horizon 5 will be released in just under 1 month.
Oh my gosh, it's already gonna be here.
I need to process this, but today I have created a list of every single car that has been requested for Forza Horizon 5. To set this video up, to film, record, and edit took me over 1 month, so if you could just please do me a favor and subscribe down below, because it would help me reach my goal of 2,000 subscribers before the end of 2021. It takes less than 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. It's a small task that will make a huge difference. And also make sure you stay tuned for more supercar and exciting hypercar content coming up, including exciting vlogs and more. So if you're a car fan like me, you're gonna like this channel. But without further ado, let's jump right into it. But some manufacturers such as Tesla and Rolls-Royce will be left out of this video because it has already been confirmed that those two brands will not be coming back. And also at the end of the video, stay tuned because I will give y'all my top 10 most requested cars personally from my perspective. But before my personal list of my top 10 most requested cars, we're going to do every single requested car for Forza Horizon 5 in alphabetical order from A to Z. And also just a little disclaimer, I might have left some brands out of this video also because they have only made about 1 to 2 cars that have already been in the previous Forza Horizon 4, which was the predecessor to Forza Horizon 5. The first brand on our list is Abarth. Now, the first vehicle that we have from Abarth is the 2021 500 EV. It's fully electric, it has a short wheelbase, and it should be an interesting car to drive, and if you upgrade the electric motors on it, it should be a good drift car. Well, it would be, just a pretty silent one. Next up, we have Acura. So, first off, we have the 2022 NSX Type S. This is the send-off and the most hardcore version of the second generation Acura NSX, and it comes with new styling, and basically everything on the Type S is improved over the standard NSX. Also, turn on the notification bell because I have a video coming up soon where my idiot self and my brother revved up the new NSX. That was a crazy vlog to film. You're going to want to stay tuned. But the second model from Acura that we have is the TLX Type S. Now, this is Acura's version of the performance sedan. Now we move on to Alfa Romeo. So first of all, there's not many models in Alfa Romeo that have been released recently, so the only one for Alfa Romeo that we have is the new Giulia GT-AM. It's actually pronounced Giulia GT-AM. Next up, we have a manufacturer that really isn't that known that well, and that is Aspark. Aspark, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, but their model is the Owl. Not that owl. The Aspark Owl is a fully electric hypercar that does 0 to 60 faster than the current record holder for the fastest acceleration from a standstill all the way up to 60 miles an hour, which is the Rimac Nevera. And that does it in 1.85 seconds, but this does it in a mind-blowing 1.7 seconds. I know all the Tesla fanboys in the comments will be arguing,
Oh, but the new Tesla Roadster with the SpaceX package does it in just 1.1 seconds.
No, the Roadster has been delayed for so many years that I'm not even counting on it, and I've just lost the hype for it, and a lot of other people have too. But now we move on to a very known brand around the world, and that is Aston Martin. First off, we have the Valkyrie. Next up, we have the Valhalla. Now, I really don't like the Valkyrie or the Valhalla, to be honest. I don't think they look good, but the Valkyrie has something special about it, at least. But the Valhalla, on the other hand, is essentially the baby Valkyrie. Next up, we have the 2006 generation of the V8 Vantage. This has an amazing sounding, naturally aspirated V8, comes with a manual transmission, and then we have the Vantage GT8, which is basically the track-focused variant of the Vantage. That is the V8 Vantage and not the V12 Vantage. Also, speaking of the V12 Vantage, if you haven't already seen my video of where I rendered the new V12 Vantage, make sure you go check that video out. There will be a link for it down in the description below. And now we have the 2022 Vantage F1 edition. Now we have the DBX, which is Aston Martin's first ever SUV, but what's so special about the DBX is that it might be the prettiest SUV ever created. Now we have the Victor. Now, this car isn't really essentially a production vehicle because it is a one of one. Now, it has retro styling, and it also comes with a 7.3 liter naturally aspirated V12 paired with a 6-speed manual transmission, almost 850 horsepower that this thing pushes out, and a top speed of over 200 miles an hour. This thing will be extremely fun to drive. Now we have the V12 Speedster. Now, this uses a twin turbocharged V12. It is front engine, rear wheel drive, and it is basically in the holy trinity of open top speedsters from today's world. world. Now moving on to Audi. So first off, we have the V8 Audi R8, which was the first generation of the Audi R8. Now I think its V8 sounds incredible and one of the best sounding V8s that Audi has ever made. Now there is another R8 that I have to mention, but it is on my top 10 list, so make sure you stay tuned for the end of the video. Hint, it does not have a V8 or a V10. Now we have the new RS5, which has an amazing sounding twin turbocharged V6, and it is pretty decently fast. Now we have the new Audi RS3, which keeps the 5-cylinder engine still alive. Another 5-cylinder car from Audi that's on the list is the new Audi TT RS, and then we have the new RS6 and RS7, and next up we have the facelifted Audi R8. But subscribe down below for the full video where I got the crap scared out of me in a 1400 horsepower twin turbo Audi R8. That thing is just absolutely insane. Now we are moving on to the B section, and that is Bentley. So we have the Mulliner Bacalar, which is a crazy hypercar grand tour. I don't even know what to call it really, because there's no really real classification for it. Next we have the 2021 Bentley Continental GT Speed, which is currently the fastest production Bentley ever. And also next on our list we have the facelifted Bentley Bentayga Speed. And the last Bentley on our list is the new Flying Spur. Now this thing, it has a higher top speed than most supercars, which is pretty crazy. BMW. And let me just say, there is a lot. First up, we have the M8 Competition, which is my favorite BMW M car ever made. And then we have the M6 V10. Now, this car looks odd, but I mainly want it because of the coupe-like silhouette and that V10 sound. Now we have the E61 M5. And no, this is not the E60 M5, which is just the sedan version. The E61 M5 is the E60 M5, but just turned into a wagon form. Under the hood of the E61 M5 is a naturally aspirated 5-liter V10 that screams, and I just think it's such a cool thing to have a naturally aspirated V10 in a family station wagon. Now we have the M5 CS. Now this is the first time that the CS badge has been put onto an M5. Honestly, I just think this car is really overrated. Now we have the iX. I don't even want to talk about this one. Now we have the new M4 and M3 Competition, and then we have the M2 CS, M4 GT3, which is an insane looking race car, X3M Competition, X4M Competition, X5M Competition, X6M Competition, and finally the X7M50i. Now we have one of the best hypercar manufacturers out there, Bugatti. Now first off, we have the Bolide, which is one of the most insane hypercars that have ever been created. Next up, we have the Type 57 Atlantic. Now this has a really good backstory to it, but if you want me to make a video about that, just leave in the comments below. Next up, we have the Chiron Supersport 300 Plus, which broke the 300 mph barrier for a production car. And next up, we have the Chiron Pure Sport, which is a track-focused Chiron. Then we have the 110, which is basically the recreation of the Bugatti EB110 from the 90s. And now for the last two models for Bugatti, we have the Vision Gran Turismo. Now this thing was a crazy concept car. Now the production version of the Bugatti Chiron when it first came out was actually based on the styling of the Vision Gran Turismo, and I just think it's just such a cool looking car. And now for the last one on our list, we have the original Veyron. This was the most insane car when it released, and it is still one of the most insane cars. Next up, we have Cadillac. Now we have the CT5 and CT4 Blackwing. Now the CT5V Blackwing uses a 6.2 liter supercharged V8, which is just incredible, and you can also option it with a manual gearbox. And the CT4V Blackwing is basically just the baby sibling of the CT5 Blackwing. Next up, we have Chevy. Now the first one, of course, we are going to add the C8 Z06. Now I think that the Forza Horizon 5 developers got a sneak peek before anybody else saw the C8 Z06 without the covers on, because Horizon 5 will debut after the C8 Z06 debuts. Next up, we have the Silverado and Silverado 2500 HD, and the new Camaro, and the new Camaro ZL1 1LE. Next up, we have Chrysler. Now I own a Chrysler myself. It is a PT Cruiser that sounds like a baby Ferrari F430, but one of the cars for Chrysler that we have that have been requested is the 2004 ME412. Now this is Chrysler's supercar that actually never went into production, and a lot of people have forgotten about this car, but I certainly didn't. And next we have the new Pacifica and the new Chrysler 300, just to Hellcat swap it. Next up, we have De Tomaso, and this model that we have is the P72, and in my opinion, it is the most beautiful car ever made. Next up, we have Dodge. Now I'm just going to go through this one quickly. We have the Durango Hellcat, the Challenger Hellcat Red Eye, Charger Hellcat Red Eye, Challenger and Charger Scat Pack Wide Body. Now we have Ferrari, and just like BMW, There's a lot. The first Ferrari that I'm going to mention is actually in my top 10 list, so make sure you stay tuned for the whole video to where I reveal that Ferrari. But first off, we have the 812 Competizione, and this is the hardcore version of the 812 Superfast. I rendered this car before it even came out of the front and the back, so it was pretty special for me, and I really am looking forward to driving this in Horizon 5. Now we have the 296 GTB. Now this is Ferrari's first ever V6 production car ever since the Dino back in the 60s and 70s, which is a really special thing. Now we have the F8 and F8 Spider. It's basically a more daily drivable pista. Some people prefer the F8 over the pista, but I am not one of those people. Next up we have the Roma. Now I don't like this car a lot, and I'm hoping to see some carbon fiber aero kits. And next up we have the Monza SP1 or SP2. I'm not exactly which one will make it into the game. Now we have the FXXK Evo, which is basically just the FXXK except turned into the evolution of that. I think it is one of the most cool looking Ferraris ever made, and it's a really good track monster, and it also has a 9,250 RPM redline from its naturally aspirated V12 with an electric motor. Next up we have the P80C. Now barely anyone has actually requested this car, but I still keep this place in my heart because it is based on the Ferrari 488, which is my second dream car. Next up we have the 812 GTS, which is the convertible version of the 812 Superfast, and then we have the Ferrari 308, Ferrari 599 GTB Fiorano, Ferrari 360 Modena, and the Ferrari F430, not the Scuderia version, but just the original F430. Next up we have Ford, which is one of the most known car brands around the world. So now we have the GT90, which is a concept car from 1995, and it used a quad turbocharged V12 engine, and unfortunately it never became a production car, but it was an awesome car that I think it definitely should have gone into production. Now we have the new Mustang Mach-1, the 2021 F-150 Raptor, the new F-150 Lightning, and the new Ford Puma, and lastly we have the Mustang Mach-E GT. I don't even want to talk about this one. Next up we have the H section, and starting off we have Hennessey. They're mainly just a tuning company, but the only car that we have from them is the Venom F5. This thing is aiming for over 300 miles an hour. Now we have Honda. Now we have a few on this list, and starting off with the first one is the 10th generation Civic Si, and I'm also hoping for the Honda Accord Sport and even the Odyssey because a drift build minivan would be cool, wouldn't it? For Hummer we have the new Hummer EV, and next up moving to Hyundai we have the Elantra N, which is Hyundai's take on the performance sedan. Next up we have Jaguar. We have the new F-Type SVR, which comes with a supercharged V8, and for the second car on Jaguar we actually have another car that has a supercharged V8, but this is an SUV, the F-Pace SVR. Now next up we have Jeep. We have the new Wrangler, then we have the new Grand Cherokee, and the Grand Wagoneer. And now for Kia we have the K5, which is an incredibly good looking sedan, and then we have the Telluride, which is pretty good for off-roading. Now we move on to Koenigsegg, which is one of the greatest hypercar manufacturers ever. Also, if you want to check out the previous video where I checked out the one-of-one Koenigsegg Regera Charge, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, but it is a one-of-one Koenigsegg, so there is only one in existence, and I made a vlog with it in the previous video, so make sure you check it out. Link in the description below. The first requested one is the Jesko Absolute. Now this is basically the Jesko with the track pack, except without the crazy rear wing and all that downforce and stuff. It is basically just the low drag version of the track pack, and I actually prefer the Jesko Absolute to the track pack. And then the next one on our list we have the Jumeirah, which is a hybrid 3-cylinder car that makes 1700 horsepower, and it is a 4-seater hypercar that does 0 to 60 in
1.9 seconds.
And now we have Lamborghini, beloved Lamborghini. Now we have the 6.2 liter Murcielago, which is the first generation Murcielago, so this came before the LP640 and the Murcielago SV. Next up we have the Asterion. Now this is a pretty forgotten supercar also, but it is not a production vehicle, it was just a concept, and it came with the 5.2 liter naturally aspirated V10 from the Huracan, but it also does come with 3 electric motors that makes it all-wheel drive, and it produces over 900 horsepower. The next one on my list is in my top 10 list also, and I've actually wrote in it, and I've also made a video about it, so if you want to check the link in the description down below, you'll find out what that car is before I even say it. And yes, there is a second Lamborghini that will be in my top 10 list, and now this one I have filmed so many of them, mainly during a Gold Rush rally, but here's just a little sound clip of it. I've heard it on track, and I've sat inside of it. Oh my gosh, it is just one of the greatest cars. And yes, I have a third Lamborghini that will be in my top 10 list. Now I'm not going to say this one either, but it is not a Huracan, but it does have a V10, but not 5.2 liters. Next up we have the Huracan STO. Now everybody knows what this is. It's the most hardcore version of the Huracan, basically a street legal race car. Now we have the Lamborghini Sian FKP37 and the Countach LPI 800-4 and the Countach LP400S. And also we have the SC20, which is basically an open top hypercar, basically the successor to the Aventador J. And now we have another V10, which is the Huracan Evo, which is basically the updated version of the Huracan LP610-4. Another updated version of a Lamborghini is the Aventador S, and then we have the last Aventador ever. Well, technically not actually if you think about it, but we have the Aventador Ultimate. Now for Land Rover, we don't really have to say anything about this because the new Defender will already be in the game, so yeah. New Defender. And now we have Lexus. Now this is a very underrated car brand in today's world. So first off, we have the Lexus LC500, which is one of the greatest looking cars ever, and it has a huge 5-liter naturally aspirated V8 that it just sounds so good. And then we have the LFA Nürburgring edition, which is basically, well, you guessed it, a track-focused LFA that went for faster Nürburgring times. Now we have the Lexus IS500. Now this is technically the spiritual successor to the Lexus ISF from back in the day, but this uses a 5-liter naturally aspirated V8 from the LC500, and it is just such a cool thing because it is in a family sedan. And then another V8 Lexus that we have is the RCF Track Edition. And next up we have Lotus. Now we have the Emira, which is their latest sports car, but it kind of looks like a supercar actually, and it can also be optioned with a 6-speed manual transmission, which is great. Now we have the Avaya, which is a completely different Lotus than any other Lotus ever made, and it is a fully electric hypercar with 2,000 horsepower. And lastly for Lotus, we have the Evora GT, which is the hardcore version of the Lotus Evora, and it looks really good, and I honestly think it's pretty underrated. Now we have Maserati. So first of all, we have the new Gran Turismo, and then we have the MC20, which is Maserati's first supercar in 15 years. Next up we have Mazda. Now there's only one car in this list, and that is the RX-9 Vision concept car, which is just drop dead gorgeous. That's all I need to say. And now we have McLaren. Now there is a lot on this list too. Now the first one on the list for McLaren is actually in my top 10 list too. You might guess what that is. I mean, it might be pretty obvious at this point, but I've been on a track day with 2 of them, and it actually is a really, really loud stock. Next up, we have the 675 LT, which is a long tail version, or technically the track focused version of the McLaren 650S. It hasn't been in any Forza game ever, not even in any motorsport games, but I hope it does come for Forza Horizon 5. Now we have the Elva, which is McLaren's take on the modern hypercar open top speedster, and this is actually my favorite out of the 3 of the holy trinity of the hypercar speedsters. The Senna GTR, which is basically just the Senna just turned up even more crazy than it already is. And then we have the Artura, which is basically a baby P1, but it uses a hybrid system with the twin turbocharged V6. And now we have the F1 LM, and now we have the last one on the McLaren list, which is the GT. Now we have Mercedes-Benz AMG. First one on the list is the GT Black Series, which is currently the fastest car on the Nürburgring. Now we have another Black Series, which is the SLS AMG Black Series, and then we have the new G63 AMG and the G-Wagon 4x4 Squared, which would be really, really good for off-roading. And now for the last one on the Mercedes list, we have the new A45 AMG. Now these we don't get here in the USA, so it would be cool to at least drive it in Forza Horizon 5. Next up we have Nissan. Now of course the first one we are going to do is the 400Z, technically just the Nissan Z. But yeah, you already know about this car, so we don't have to really talk about it. But next up we have the GTR Nismo, and then for Pagani we have the Huayra R. This is the successor to the Pagani Zonda R. And then we have the 1999 Pagani Zonda C12. Now this is the car that put Pagani on the map, and it would be really, really cool to see this because it was the original Pagani Zonda. Oh yes, Porsche. We have the 992 911 Turbo S, and then we have the 992 GT3.
Okay.
I'll say go. So you do not have another extra gear just clunking around the edges like. And then we have the 991.2 GT3, and I specifically say the 991.2 over the 991.1 generation because the majority of the people think the 991.2 looks better over the 991.1. Then we have the Cayman GT4, which is the 981 generation, which is today's version. And lastly, we have the Cayenne Turbo GT, which is a really unnecessary vehicle in my opinion. Next up, we have Ram, which is the TRX, which you already know what this is special for. And then we have Rimats, and that is the Nevera. Now in Forza Horizon 4, it had the Rimac C2, but this is the Nevera, the production version of the Concept 2. Then we have Subaru, which is the new BRZ, and it's basically the new Toyota GR86. And speaking of Toyota, that is the next brand on our list. So for the first one, of course, we have the GR86, and we have the new GR Supra, but we already know that is going to be in the game. And next up, we have the GR Yaris. Now we don't get this either here in the United States, so it would be cool to just drive it in Forza Horizon 5. And now we have the new 4Runner, the new Land Cruiser, the new Tundra, the new Tacoma TRD that are all good for off-roading, except, well, for the Tacoma. Kind of. And then we have the Camry TRD. Next up, we have Volkswagen. Next up, we have the Golf R MK8, which is the 8th generation of the Golf, and it is faster than you'd expect. And then we have Volvo, which is technically Polestar also, which is Volvo's performance brand. And we have the Polestar 1, which is basically just, well, Volvo's performance model. Now we have W Motors, which is technically the company known as Lycan. So the car that we have on this list is only one, and that is Fenrir. This is W Motors' latest hypercar, and it comes with a flat 6 twin turbocharged engine, and it looks like it came from like 2070 or something. Alright, now we are finally moving on to my personal top 10 most requested cars for Forza Horizon 5. Now first off, starting on the list, we have the Lamborghini Miura SVJ. It is the most hardcore version of the Lamborghini Miura, and the Miura by itself just created what a supercar actually is. For number 9, we have the Tesla Model S Plaid. Now we already know that Tesla isn't actually coming to Forza Horizon 5, but it is a family sedan with over 1,000 horsepower coming from just electric motors. 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds. This thing is ballistic. For number 8, we have the Audi R8 V12 TDI. Now this is an R8 with a V12, but not just any V12, a 6-liter diesel V12. It was a concept car that never actually became into production, but I think it's just so unique, and I 100% think it should be added to the game. Now for number 7, we have the SSC Tuatara. This is one of my favorite current modern hypercars, and everyone knows the controversy about this car with the backstory and everything that happened last year, but it has been proven by Guinness World Records that it is currently the fastest production car, and maybe it might be the fastest car in Horizon 5. We'll just have to see. For number 6, we have the Lamborghini Murcielago LP640. Now this was the first ever Lamborghini that I rode in, so it's really special to me, and I've ridden in a bunch of supercars. Of something to get used to. The color combinations and the turbo noise. But the Murcielago, it had the best experience out of all of them. It's definitely not the fastest supercar I've rode in. In fact, it might have been the slowest, but it had the best sound I have ever heard, coming from a retro Lamborghini, that is. At number 5, we have the McLaren 765 LT. This is one of the meanest looking cars ever. It just looks like an alien spaceship. It is insanely quick, and it is a great track car, and it is just an amazing car overall. For number 4, we have the Mercedes-Benz SLR McLaren. Now this is a partnership between McLaren and Mercedes. Combine both of those companies together, and they made a great car that is actually quite underrated but is going up in value. It uses a supercharged V8, and it looks just so cool with that extremely long front hood. And number 3, we have the Ferrari SF90 and SF90 Spider. Now, I didn't like the Ferrari SF90 when it first came out. In fact, I didn't actually care about it at all, but now I think it is one of the best looking cars on sale today. Ferrari claims that the SF90 will do 0 to 60 in just 2.5 seconds, but this thing is highly underrated by Ferrari. In fact, you can do it in just 2 seconds, and it has also smashed a lot of lap records recently, so it would be cool to have that too. And at number 2, we have the Lamborghini Aventador SVJ. Now this is one of my dream Lamborghinis. It has a V12 naturally aspirated single clutch gearbox. It was the fastest car around the Nürburgring before the Mercedes AMG GT Black Series took that record last year, and I just think it is one of the coolest looking and one of the most insane looking cars
ever.
It looks even better than most hypercars to me, and that's saying something. And that V12 engine just sounds so mean. And now for my number one most requested car for Forza Horizon 5. You're probably not even going to guess what I'm about to say, but it is the first generation Lamborghini Gallardo 5-liter. It is one of my favorite Lamborghinis ever, and it comes with a 5-liter naturally aspirated V10 that will be paired with a 6-speed manual transmission or a 6-speed single clutch robotized manual gearbox. It hasn't been in any of the Forza Horizon games, but it has been in some motorsport games, but it should come to Horizon, and hopefully it will for Forza Horizon 5. It has the best sounding V10 engine ever in my opinion. Yes, I said it, it is better than the Carrera GT or the Lexus LFA. Now, if you take a look back at Forza Horizon 2, that's what it should sound like in Forza Horizon 5. At least that's what I'm hoping. And in Forza Horizon 2, it sounded exactly what it did, like with Street Speed 717's former Lamborghini Gallardo with the Fab Speed exhaust. Twin turboing one of these cars also makes them extremely fast, and it still sounds really good. And even with the raw Lamborghini E-gear transmission with a single clutch, the way it just jerks you back and forth in the seat, oh my gosh, it's just such a cool thing. But yeah, that is basically it for every car that has been requested for Forza Horizon 5. Again, if you haven't already, please subscribe down below to help me reach my goal of 2,000 subscribers before the end of 2021. It takes less than 2 seconds to just subscribe and hit the notification bell, so if you would please do that, it would help me more than you would imagine. And also, we have a ton of supercar and exciting hypercar content coming up, including exciting supercar and hypercar vlogs. So if you're a car fan like me, you're gonna like this channel. But if you loved today's video, I know you love some of my other videos, so I recommend you go check them out. But I hope to see you in a future video. Bye for now.
Insanity.